brush thing. So we'll be dealing with that also today too. I'm very happy to be here in-house at Transatlantic Production. I met at the Melanin Conference this year, and our relationship has become very close. And he is also a brother like I am of the Order of Melchizedek and the Great Brotherhood of Sirius that we'll deal into also today. So we're going to deal with a lot of things. Now, first thing we're going to do is just get this glass of water. We're going to pour libations. So, Apit, Ashe, Osar, Ashe, Heru, Ashe, Aset, Ashe, Awas, Ashe, Thunderdog, Ashe, Astal, Ashe, Mamu, Ashe, Pele, Ashe, Het Heru, Ashe, Obatala, Ashe, Shango, Ashe, Iminja, Ashe, Orisha Oku, Ashe, Oya, Ashe, Olodarun, Ashe, Ogun, Ashe, Elegba, Ashe, Ptah, Ashe, Ra, to all the gods known and unknown. Ashe, to all the ancestors known and unknown. Ashe. So we can pour these libations and we'll get right into what we're going to deal with. The first thing we're going to deal with is because we have a lot of scholars out here that don't want to deal with Atlantis. Well, number one, Atlantis did exist. It predates Kemet, but now we'll understand now that this was all one landmass at one time. And not only was it one landmass, we also understand that Egypt was one of the capitals of Atlantis. Now we have proof coming from Nexus Magazine, May 1994, where they have temples, a temple of Anubis or Anpu in the South Pacific that actually deals with this particular. Here's a picture of Anpu on the wall, if you can focus in on that. There's a picture of Anpu or Anubis on the walls in a temple in the South Pacific, and it's saying in actuality that this Kemetic mythology, they have carbon dated this, and it dates all the way back to Atlantis and Lemuria, which can go thousands and thousands of years. And we're going to deal with also unwritten history today with these particular monuments also too. So these are documents and all based on Atlantis with different hieroglyphic inscriptions and different things and all, and different hieroglyphic inscriptions on this particular article that the white boy is also dealing with. And it also deals with DNA, which is also melanin. You need to get some books too. We always give you references, and some of the best references for that is Atlantis and Lemuria by Rudolf Steiner, as well as for Atlantis. Then you have Lemuria. You would also have the Children of Mu, the Cosmic Forces of Mu, and the Land of Mu, or Mu by James Churchward. Not Albert Churchward, but James Churchward. So this is some actual documents. Now that we have documents of Atlantis, as well as a lot of documents are also left in what you would call India, because that was all Indus Kush at that particular time. And so what it is there's nothing new under the sun, as well as only that which has been forgotten. You understand? Now we understand that also in the bottom of the British Museum, as well as the University of Chicago, they have documents on Atlantis, which Kemet went all the way back to Atlantis. We even know now that Osiris was a god of Lemuria. And when we deal with the Sphinx that's over 2 million years old, we'll go into some deeper mysteries also too. Now, for the first thing that we want to start off, with the temple that contains the inscriptions of 90,000 years old. And that particular temple is the temple of, excuse me, let me get this right, is the temple of Dendera. Now, Dendera has inscriptions in it 90,000 years old. Even though this particular temple was one of the latest temples built, it is one of the oldest temples. Why? Because they built this temple off of an older temple that they tore down. And the inscriptions, there was inscriptions in the wall, in a crack in the wall, that told them how to build the newer temple. We're going to treat this very careful, because we're going to treat this particular situation with Dendera with very authenticity, and also we want to treat this very with a fine-tooth comb, because this particular temple of Dendera also indicates where we are going as black people, as well as the temple of Edfu and other things that we're going to get into. Now, this temple of Dendera, what you see here is a remake of the temple of Dendera. And what I mean is I'm going to show you Dendera in its ruins. This would be Dendera in its ruins. Now, Dendera is a place in Kemet, but this is actually the temple of Het-Heru, known as Hathor. Now, this is the ruin part where you see where the 19th century Napoleon artists came in and they redid the actual temple. So what happened was they came in and they drew these temples first. Then they did what you would call the representation of how it would look in ancient Kemet. And this is the remake of that particular temple. The one that would look like how it would look in the ancient Kemet. Now you see heads here of the goddess Hathor, even though the white boy put a little bit of wider noses on, keener noses on them. The noses in actuality were in fact wider noses and all. And I have, let's see, I have a color picture of the temple of Dendera also. This would be a color picture done by an artist by the name of David Roberts. And there's a greater picture, but they don't show this picture much. And it's done, did you get a big good view of that? By the artist David Roberts, an 18th century artist that traveled to Kemet and drew the temples before the paint fell off of them. Because each temple was painted white and it had the hieroglyphic of the Medu-Neter inscriptions painted. Every last one of those was painted. And this is one by David Roberts, whereas you can actually see the nose is a little bit wider. We'll go into some deeper details in a few minutes. But this particular temple of Dendera that we talk about is actually the temple of Hathor at Dendera. Dendera is the actual place in Kemet. And now some people have a thing where they say Greek names and all, but there's no such thing as Greek names. The Greeks, remember, the first Europeans could not talk until Africans or black people taught them. And the first 300 years of Greece was also, black people. So they are the people that taught the language. So in actuality, when you hear Greece, you are hearing fundamental African language. So Egypt, it means Agatos, which means black, is also a fundamentally a Greek language, but it's actually a fundamental African language. There's no such thing as a European language, period. Because even Rome, the first 200 or 300 years of Rome, were black people. So therefore, we understand that even the Romans, remember the European couldn't talk, get Boney's account. You understand where he said we taught them how to speak. So those particular people couldn't even talk at that particular time. So the actual indigenous black people of Rome and Greece taught them how to talk. Now we have evidence on that also too. Now at this particular time, you will see the back view of Dendera. The back view of Dendera also too. Now Dendera is a very important temple. You see the back view? Also, the side view of Dendera. The remakes now. We're interested in focusing on not so much of the ruined temples, because you can go up the Nile with Dr. Ben, Asa Hilliard, Charles Finch, or also, what's my man in D.C., Tony Browder, and you can actually see there's several tours, black and white tours, that you can go up and see the actual ruins. Now, there are two or three temples that are the best preserved. One is Dendera, one is the temple of Isis or Aset at Philae, and the other one is the temple of Edfu, the temple of Heru or Horus at Edfu. These are the three best preserved temples. You see, they just redid Hatshepsut's temple. We'll show you a picture of that one also. Now, one of the key books that you must get that they just put back in print, black people, is the book Brian M. Fagan's book, The Rape of the Nile. This is a book that was also recommended by John Henry Clark to most people. It was been out of print, but now this particular book has now been released back in print within the last month or so. And so some of these particular remakes you will find in this particular book also too. I'll be giving you other books that you can also reference also. Brian Fagan's book, The Rape of the Nile. And it says, tomb robbers, tourists, and archaeologists in Egypt. The Rape of the Nile. You see. So now, this is a key book that you want to get so you can have some indication of what these temples used to look like, as well as a picture of the temple of Dendera. And also, when I go into the zodiac of Dendera, there is a whole section in here on how they took that zodiac and carved it down and took it to the Louvre in Paris also too. We're going to get into a lot of things today. Now, the next thing we're going to deal with what is called a colonnade. This is the colonnade that is on the outside of Dendera. Now this particular colonnade is what you would see. Before you come into the temples, you would pass through this particular colonnade. You now see one in Paris. And in most buildings, early 19th century buildings and 18th century buildings, you see a colonnade right over the door. Now it's real key about this particular colonnade. Now I want to show you this. Now this colonnade, as you see, you can see some wings and you'll see a disc. Now let me get a picture of the winged disc. Right here is another picture of the winged disc. And it is also showing the symbol of the white man, this winged disc. It's showing a symbol of the white man, and I'll get you an even better picture as we go on. It's showing a picture of, the black man, right when you go in the temple. This winged disc that you see, you see two wings, you see a disc, and you see two serpents. I should get a better representation of that particular winged disc. Okay, do you have that? Okay. No, the book. Okay. Now you have that. Okay. This winged disc, you see a dot in the middle of the disc. You see two serpents. Now I got a papyrus that I'm going to deal with at the end of the lecture that will go into this. This disc you see in the middle is nothing but the black dot of the black sun in black people. This particular sons of Israel. Is Isis, is Ra is the sun, and you have the son of the sun. That's that sun, and it's also in all black people. No sun, no godship, no heaven. We'll go deeper into that as we go on. Now, this particular colonnade, if you can look real close, I want you to focus in on real close. You will see that there's a bridge coming right down, and there's water, and there's boats. And they had a bridge that was built across the water that came right into the colonnades of right before you got to the temple. So you could walk across the water with a bridge coming up to the colonnade, and then you go into the temple of Dendera. And you see people coming on, and you see a procession going on. Different things that's going on also. Palm trees that let you know that this was a tropical land also too. Now, we want to go back, and we want to show you, we're still dealing with this temple of Dendera. Now, why is the temple of Dendera so doggone important? Well, it's very easy. The temple of Dendera is so important because what is on the inside of the temple of Dendera? What is on the inside of the temple of Dendera is the famous zodiac of Dendera, the zodiac of the temple of Hathor. Now this is very key. Now, if I may, I'll show you some things, I'll point out some things. This zodiac has the symbol of the heavens. It has the pictures of Isis as the pillars of heaven, and her son also, Heru, as also the pillars of heaven also. This particular stuff that's going on the inside is nothing but all of the stars. It represents all of the heavens. Right over here you see is a picture supposedly of a black woman that says, as above, so below. That's the law of correspondence, which means as above, so below. Now, based on as above, so below, what you have is, this is the sky, this is the universe. And on the earth plane, you have the God of the earth plane, which is in fact the black woman. Even though, is it not written in your law that ye all are gods? John chapter 10, verse 34 to 36. The good book you need to read called Ye Are Gods by Annalise Guerin, that deals with that. But this particular, the supreme microcosm of the macrocosm is the black female that you see right here stretching out her arms. Also represents the goddess Nut, stretching out her arms also. Now, it's real key because on the inside of this particular zodiac, you have a picture of a hippopotamus goddess. And she's giving birth to a dog. This hippopotamus goddess represents the constellation of Draco, the triple blackness of space, that gives birth to her first son. That particular first son is Sut. Al-Sut, which means the god of Sirius, the star Sirius. So the triple blackness of space in the northern hemisphere of the universe called Draco. She gives birth to her first son in her south gate, which is her vagina. And that first son is the first star in the universe known as Sirius, or Sophis, or Sept, or Sut. And that particular star is the central sun of our particular. You have the sun that you see out here is nothing but a reflection of a greater sun. That greater sun is the star sun Sirius, which is the brightest star in our constellations, as well as the true father of our particular universe. But the key to this is that father has a mother. There is no such thing as a father that deals with this woman. So when you talk about the father in heaven, you're actually talking about the son in heaven. And when you talk about the son of the father, you're talking about the grandson or the son of the son. But the supreme archetype of heaven is the mother, known as the goddess Kali in India. It's known as the goddess Apit here, or Tyert, or the goddess Nut. Now, Apit, or Tyert, is this hippopotamus goddess that gives birth to this little dog, the dog star. You see, the actual dog star. So this is very key. Now, she gives birth to the dog star, and then all of the other stars and all of the actual other parts of the zodiac comes into view. Now, this particular zodiac of Dendera is real key for one reason. Number one, this is an astronomical zodiac. Now, you got to understand, there is astrology and there's astronomy. Astrology, astrological, is based on the stars in this particular, basically around the sun. You understand what I'm saying? In our solar system. Astronomy, or astronomical zodiac, deals with the zodiacal universe. This is an astronomical zodiac, which also is in this astronomical zodiac, astrological zodiac. Now, the book that now this is a key book. It's called Cyril Fagan's book. It's a book that the white boy took off the market because he was a part of the Royal Astronomical Organization in England. He found out, well, the white people were saying, well, we can't deny that Egyptian was the inventors of astronomy, but astrology, that's a whole other thing. That's Greece. So this particular white boy went back and studied the temple of Dendera and all of the other temples, and he broke down, found out in an actuality that astrology was also started in Kemet too, and there's no kind of science that don't come out of Kemet or Egypt. Now, he found this particular thing out, and they threw him out of the actual Royal Astrological Society, and as a result, he wrote a book called Astrological Origins by Cyril Fagan that now is out of print, but with some luck, I do have a copy of the book, so we can either get that printed or also, too, you know, Raoul Nefer talks about this particular person in his book Medunetta 1. Also, too, Medunetta 1. And also, too, you can also go to certain libraries and get this particular book. I think the last printing was 1972 by Llewellyn Publications. Now, so this is an astronomical zodiac. Now, this particular zodiac, like I said, in this particular temple was built in Kemet, and even though it was built in the Ptolemy period of the Greece. Now, the Greece really didn't run Kemet. The Greece was actually scared. The Greeks, excuse me, was actually scared of the Egyptian priests. So they would go. So the Egyptian priests would come to them and say, "Now we need a temple. You know what's going down?" And they would give them the money to build the temple or the manpower at this particular time with the Ptolemies when they were ruling. For the simple fact that they were scared and all of the actual Egyptian priests. So they did muscle around the other people. They didn't go up against the priests at this particular time. The priests understood in divine prophecy that the Greeks had to rule as well as Kemet had to fall. We'll get into that in a few minutes. Also, so they built this particular temple, and they tore down an ancient temple. And the ancient temple that they tore down had a hieroglyphic based on a papyrus, a crack in the wall, and they actually fashioned the actual temple. So even though the stones, and they always use the older stones, they use the stones from the older building to build a new one back. So even though this is a newer temple, it contains the oldest and it is the most complete findings in the world is in the temple of Dendera. And this zodiac is approximately 90,000 years old. This is what you're seeing right here. And on here it has the origins of the black woman being God and woman being God, period. The great microcosm of the macrocosm, which a triple blackness of space is called chaos. The womb of the universe, because everything is born from a feminine principle. Check. Now, let's go on. And we'll deal with some other things. Now, Dr. Ben said that, now, based on Brian Fagan's book, Rape of the Nile, you're going to find out that the French blew this thing down. And they took this particular zodiac to Paris. It's in the Louvre in Paris, and they put up another plaster zodiac. Now, what had happened was it was the Russians who was going to get this zodiac. So the French, the Britons were coming was coming to get it. But before they got there, a French cat took some Arab help and blew it down. And on the way taking it to the ship, it fell into the Nile, and they needed more help. But they got it up out of the Nile, and they took it and they put it on a ship and rushed it to France before the British could get in and get it. You understand what I'm saying? So it's, this particular, the original replica is now in the Louvre in Paris, in the Egyptian antiquities also too. Very key, because everything is in here. Now, when we deal with the actual star systems of all of these particular temples, you're going to find out that all of these particular temples are based around the star system Sirius, which is called Syriac architecture. That's the key, because that is the monument, that is heaven, and these are the monuments of heaven. Kemet was known as the heaven on earth. So as we go on. So Dr. Ben said that this was a fake one. He said there's a square zodiac, but he was mistaken for the simple fact that this is the real one that's in Paris. And the square zodiac was also on another side of the room. And that other zodiac on the other side of the room is this particular square zodiac. 2 levels of that square zodiac also. Now you want to get deeper into the astronomical part of the temples and the breakdown of the stars and the temples, you need to buy a book by the name of Norman Lockyer, or Lockyer, Lockyer, J. Norman Lockyer. And that particular book is called The Dawn of Astronomy. Now, the key to this book is out of print, but now you can also go to, there's a new out-of-print book company called Kessinger, and they've just reprinted this Dawn of Astronomy in here. And in here they show different breakdowns of the Temple of Dendera, the Temple of Dendera. And so on one side of the hall, you have one zodiac that was in the ceiling. That's the round zodiac that I just showed you. But on another part of the ceiling, you would have the square zodiac. And this was in the temple ceilings. And they blew down the round zodiac. And for some reason, it's cut off because they left the black woman in the damn temple. But they blew it down. Now, so that's the square zodiac. Another form of that square zodiac that's in Dendera is also other forms that deals with different things you see. And right here you see the pictures of the circle, which is also the boat, which is also representations of UFOs that we're going to get into. And you also see the circle with the eye of Heru. So each time you see the circle, you know that that is a form of melanin also. And this is one also, too, in Dendera. These particular zodiacs with hieroglyphic inscriptions. Now, the other thing that we need to deal with is Dendera is called the Temple of the Virgin Birth. Very key. Dendera is probably one of the most important ones. There's different temples now. You know, down in Nubia, they covered up over 200 temples when they built the Aswan Dam, you see. And when they built the Aswan Dam, they covered up over 200 temples. One good book is called The Book of the Masters, Egyptian Doctrine of Light Born of the Virgin Mother by W. Marshall Adams, an out-of-print book that you can now get from African Heritage Classical Studies Research Series out of, I think that's Chesapeake, Virginia. What's my man name? You know, the E. Curtis Alexander that also does these things now. And so now, this particular Temple of the Virgin Birth that they're talking about, what happens is this particular temple was built for the star system Sirius. Now, Hathor Het Heru is the real name. Het, which means house. Heru, which means Christ. House of Heru, the house of God, which means the black woman who is Het Heru, which is the house of God. Now you got the triple goddess. You have the celestial Isis, which is Het Heru. Then you have the earth, one of the earth Isis, which is the Aset that you know of. You see, there's different forms of Isis. And then you have the winged Isis, which is Mayat, which is the end result. But, Aset. But the celestial Aset is called, Het Heru is also called the goddess Satis. And Satis is a name of Sirius also. Now, this particular temple of Dendera that I like to show was built, it was built for the star system of the temple. It was built mainly for Sirius. Now, what happened was you have the Sirius rising when your star used to rise up. This is heaven because this star was responsible for the birth of what you would call the birth of the life on this planet. It doesn't rain in Kemetic or Egypt, so the Nile was the source of the water. So as a result, every summer they'd have the rainy season. That's how you could tell whether it was whatever. You could have the dry season, you have the rainy season. And every summer you would have what is called dog days, which comes from the Dog Star series. Every July 23rd, this star would rise up over the horizon in the morning. Now this particular temple, every July 23rd, this star Sirius would rise up, and they would make it so that when it would rise up, this whole temple would light up because of that star Sirius. It would light up. And the priest was a big ceremony. And every July 23rd, that star would come up, and this particular whole temple would light up. You see, that because of that particular star system, and also Sirius, the chief star of the host of heaven, that is the son of the mother, the triple blackness of space, called Draco of Nut, or Apit, or Tired, which is represented as a hippopotamus goddess. Real key, because we're going to get into a few things in a few minutes. Now, another part of Dendera, it's a temple that is built for the star system Sirius. But now another part of Dendera is the famous Hypostyle Hall. And Hypostyle Hall means Hall of Many Columns. I'm going to show you a couple of versions of the Hypostyle Hall at Dendera, at Karnak, which is Apet-i-Su, the oldest university in the world, and also Esna. I'm going to show you pictures of the Hypostyle Hall at these particular places. So bear with me as I go through and we find these particular Hypostyle Halls. Now, the Hypostyle Hall at Dendera, let me get this particular picture so we can show you this, is a hall of many columns. It's interesting because when we deal with this, you're going to find out, when I show you these Hypostyle Halls, I'm going to also show you one at the Temple of Isis, but I'm going to show it to you in color, which would be a very good representation to put your mind back into Kemet at that particular time. I'm also going to show you pictures of the Sphinx, the famous pictures of the Sphinx before the nose was blown off. Now, this is a picture of the Hypostyle Hall of Dendera. And as you can see, there's a grand procession going on, and there's many columns. Now, please note that these particular pictures, each one of the hieroglyphics in these particular columns that was built, they had hieroglyphics of metanetta all over the temple. There was not a spot on any temple in Kemet where they didn't have metanetta. The Greeks started trying to copy, and they could not put the metanetta because the best artists in the world came from Kemet, or Egypt. Now, this Hypostyle Hall, and each one of the metanetta was painted, and they had the white backgrounds. So I'll show you representations of that. So I want you to get your cameras ready and zoom in on some of these pictures to actually show the representation of the paintings of this Hypostyle Hall. Now, each one of these were painted, and this is the Hypostyle Hall, Hall of Many Columns at Dendera. Now, it's very interesting. This is a remake because we want to show not so much of ruins. You can see that in most Kemetic books or Egyptian books of the ruins, as well as going up there now. We want to show reconstruction because we're trying to put your mind back into the part of when the black man and black woman was at their greatest ever. You understand what I'm saying? So this is the Hypostyle Hall. There's processions going on. There is the light of the sun lighting up the actual place. So very key. Now let me show you one other piece on the Hypostyle Hall at Dendera. Now, this is very key. Now, I want you to zoom in on this particular picture. Is everything all right? All right, we're going along. I want you to zoom in on the pictures. Now, I showed you before that in actuality, the actual nose that you see on the particular people when they remade Dendera, you actually see they have keen-shaped alkaline noses because the white boys tried to, didn't want to show the original thing. But David Roberts is one of the actual artists that drew some of the things, and when he sketched out some, there is a picture of the head on the inside of the temple, and I want you to zoom in on it because it is a picture of a black woman. Also, I have an actual picture. Now, this is a beautiful day because I got an actual picture of the ancient Egyptians on how they look. It was painted in the 1800s before half of and miscegenated on into what you call the Arab race now. But you know, we understand about your Nubians, but I'm going to show you the same headdress in the 1800s. Right here, if you can zoom in, there is a picture of a black woman with big lips and a wide nose, which is the same figure of supposed to be on the outside of the temple. This is on the inside of Dendera, drawn by David Roberts around in the late 1800s. As a matter of fact, we would say that this was actually, I think this was actually in Nubia 1846 that he drew this particular part that went on. So now, let's go on. Now, the next thing we want to deal with is I want to show you a color picture of what the temples used to look like on the inside of Dendera. Or on the inside. I'm going to show you one from the temple of Isis at Philae, and I'm going to show you one that in actuality, well, it's a color picture, but this one is not at Dendera. Now, I showed you the columns, right? Now, we know that the columns are black, so you don't need to trip when I show you European pictures. We know that the Europeans was not doing things for us, right? This is a picture of the column. If you look at the column, you'll see that every piece of the column was painted. You understand? Every part of the columns were painted. And this is the column at Dendera. Now, let's go on. I also want to show you a real picture, color picture, of the inside of the temples. This is a color picture, and as you can see, I want you to zoom in on this. And as you can see, every particular piece of the temple was painted. Background was white, and the meta on it was all colored. So even though the outside of these temples that they drew this way, they didn't have time to color them in, but this is how the outside looked also too. Show you another representation of a colored temple. This temple is the color from the with full color of the temple of Isis at Philae, which was the last temple that they closed. And right after they closed this temple, Europe went into a dark age. And this is also the color of the temple. This down here and also up here, you saw the different things. Every part was colored, even though they got a little bit of pinkish looking people on there. We know the deal. You understand that? Did you get it?
They can lean those to us, have the top to lean towards us, and it takes the glare off.
Okay. That's the color. That's the color. I want to get that shot in there. All right. Let's go on. Now we're going to deal with the famous temple of Karnak, which is called Apet Su, or as Dr. Ben called it, Warit. What Dr. Ben calls it, Warit. Before we go on this, like I said, this is another color picture of Dendera before the color fell off. Now, this has got to be the best painting in the world because the French didn't even get there till the late 17th century, late 1800s, early 19th century. You understand what I'm saying? And, late 1700s, early 1800s, which is the 19th century. And this paint was still on there from 2,000, some of them 3,000 years old. Check. Let you know that not only were they the best artists in the world, they said they would have 3 men working on one arm of a big statue at one time. You see. 3, 4, 5 men, and they would get it done like that. Interesting. Let me explain one thing right quick before it gets off my mind on how some of these temples were built. Let me explain this right quick. Let me show you what they used to do. They used to take a temple, and what they would do is they would build the bottom part. Then they would put sand right here. Then they would stand on the sand and they'd build the next part. Put sand there, stand on the other part, put sand there until they build it all the way to the top. They would go in where these particular columns, build the bottom part, sculpture it, put the sand, and they could build a wall. They could just stack stuff on it, and then they would clean the temple out. This was one of the methods of building the actual temples. They would fill them up. Each when they wanted to go up certain levels, they would fill the actual thing up on sand. Because they didn't need to deal with scaffolds as much for the simple fact that they had to have detailed art. And you could read these temples like books. And it's written in the stone, and most Christians can't get around that. We can take them right back and show them the origins of the Bible, the Quran, and anyone right in the stone. Now, be sure to note that every temple that I'm showing you is even though some of this stuff dates back 3, 4, 5,000 years, it's still late stuff. You see. Remember now, we didn't need temples when we were as on the same level as what we were when we was in Atlantis and Lemuria, because our Akashic records was open in our mind. And we had cosmic memory, universal consciousness, the Christ consciousness, and cosmic consciousness. We only needed to build the temples as libraries and different things like that so we can read them as storybooks when our third eye and spiritual chakra system shut down based on this third dimension. And the vibratory rate of the earth fell. So therefore, in order to obtain this cosmic consciousness, you had to go to the mystery system in Egypt, which preserved the science of the Akashic records, which was used to be in your mind, but you're getting ready to go back to this now in the later days where you won't even need this stuff. It'll be in your mind. Check. All right. Everybody's Akashic records. I want to deal with one other thing with the Temple of Dendera. From the ceiling of Dendera, the temple is dedicated to Hathor Heru, the Virgin Mother. This is the zodiac. It's probably called the planisphere. It's called, instead of a zodiac, it's called a planisphere. That manifests the intimate connection with the past of the celestial taken by the departed, the holy dead in the interest of light. Now, we also have a breakdown of that particular temple of Dendera, which you have the star Sirius. This is also called, the key to that is the star Sirius that's called the primordial star of all times. And a lot of that stuff is coming from Mariette's book on Dendera. There's a particular person that wrote an 18th century Egyptologist wrote a book. His name was Mariette. It's an out-of-print book on Dendera, and he did most of the work on Dendera, which we had, which is key because that zodiac is very, very key at this particular time. Now we're going right on. The next particular temple that we're going to deal with is the temple called Ipet-Isu or Karnak. It is the largest temple in the world. It is a half a mile long. No, it is it is a mile long, half a mile wide. You understand what I'm saying? That means that would take up 2 or 3 blocks, maybe more than 2 or 3 blocks. A mile long and a half a mile wide. The complete 20 blocks. That's the complete layout of Dendera. Real key at this particular time. Now we're going to start off first to enter in this journey of Dendera, the largest school ever built in the world for a worship of the celestial gods. The largest temple ever in the world is the temple of Ipet-Isu or Karnak. Now we first start off with the colonnade again. And as I told you before, you have the winged disc. And right here, you will see real close ram-headed sphinx. Now let me get a picture of a ram-headed sphinx while I'm talking. Because it's very key, because this is going to later on symbolize a sacred marriage to another temple. This temple, these temples were like people. We're going to get into that in a few minutes. And they were married to each other. Now this is the temple. The first temple of Dendera that I told you was the temple of Amen-Ra. Remember that, right? No, excuse me. The first temple I showed you of Dendera was the temple of Hathor Heru. This particular temple is the temple of Amen-Ra. Now, at Karnak, or what you would call the temple of Ipet-Isu, which means the oldest university in the world. Now, very key. What you had here, you will see the colonnade. Now, when you see this particular colonnade, you're going to find out that you see ram-headed sphinx, and they would lead up to the temple. This is the first doorway. These ram-headed sphinx are also leading up to the colonnade. Then you would come in and you see the pharaohs, and they're having a grand procession going on, and these particular ram-headed sphinx that would lead up to the temple. This is a picture of the ram-headed sphinx. You already know what the lion-headed sphinx is. But this is the temple of the picture of the ram-headed sphinx. Now they would lead up to the front door of the temple. This was one up here with the head cut off. Now this is at Karnak. They would lead up to the front door of the temple. Now this is key because I'm going to show you the sacred marriage between the temples. Now that's the colonnade. The first thing we want to deal with the reconstruction, because Karnak is one of the worst ones in ruins now. And the reconstruction of Karnak is this. Ipet-Isu. And what you see here, and I'm going to break this temple down, and I'm going to somehow try to show you each section, because the temple was too large to put in, to show the whole temple. I'm going to show you a grand layout of each section of the temple. This temple of Karnak, now this is when you first get into the inside of the courtyard. When you see these particular things here, they're called colonnades. You even had the one big colonnade is what you saw as Dendera, which made a whole temple. These particular things that they call colonnades. There's a building in Atlanta that now is built of these particular colonnades. I'm going to get into what is called civic architecture, and we're going to show you what they're doing now in the new Atlanta. It's called Atlanta, Georgia. And they started building this civic architecture around the year of 1986. And now Atlanta is almost being completed as a Kemetic. And I'll go into some things that's going on also there. Now, this is the grand entrance. This is the courtyard. Out front, you had these particular columns here that they had blocks on it, and they were not made, they were just made to stand up. They were not made to support anything. Now, this particular grand entrance that you call Karnak, once you went into the front courtyard, coming through the colonnades, first you come through the colonnades with the ram-headed sphinx, and you go down and you go into the front part of the actual building. Then you get inside this courtyard that you're seeing right here. Now, you getting good pictures of this? Great. You get inside of this courtyard. Then the next thing is you're going into another part of the building, which is on the inside, which is the hypostyle hall, which means halls of many columns. When you get into the other part of the building, you go into this particular part. And these are these great columns. And they are big. I mean, you can fit 10 people around each column, holding hands. That's how big these columns are. This is the hypostyle hall. And if you look real close, you can see the outside of which you just came in here. And you see the ones that's standing up on the outside, that's these. But this is the hypostyle hall. Hall of many columns is what it is called. This is the grand hypostyle hall of Karnak, which is the biggest hypostyle hall in the world. And it is an awesome structure. If you would actually see these things, the real pictures. But I'm interested in showing you reconstructions. Other people can show you, you can buy any books and see the other ones, that's no problem. But what I want to show you is reconstructions based on Napoleon's artists. When they went in, they drew the ruins. Then they drew the reconstructions of this particular hypostyle hall. Let me show you the ruins right quick, if I have some. Let me show you the ruins of Karnak, which is a body of ruins. Now you stick with me, because I'm going to show you some stuff that deals with the whiteboard tonight, and a whole temple that they tore down in Kemetic because they didn't want you to see the inscriptions. Now, the inscriptions of this particular thing. Now this is the grand ruins of this particular part that you see the arrow standing on in the late 1800s, is the grand ruins of Karnak. You see, right here, you see this that's going on. Now, I want to show you some other things right now. Now, look at this. We showed you the hypostyle hall. The next part we're going to show you, we're going to break this thing down. I showed you the ram-head sphinx. Now, when I go to the temple of Luxor, I'm going to tell you about the lion-head sphinx. And I'm going to show you that. I'm going to tell you about that because it symbolizes a marriage between two temples. Now, this is the grand layout of the temple of Ipet-Asu. You see the sphinx coming into the temple. Then you see one part of the temple. Now let's break this down. Let's go step by step. This part of the temple that you see right here, this is the grand layout. Right here. Huge. This is the hypostyle hall. When you see these dots, it's showing the actual layout of the hall of many columns. These are the columns that I first showed you standing on the outside. This is the inside wall. These are the two colonnades. These pictures, these dots are the sphinx. This is how it actually looks. These columns are standing up here. You see them right here. The hypostyle hall that I just showed you, you see them right here. Now, this is the first part that we're going to deal with. The first part, we're going to deal with certain sections. The first part, you see this doorway here. You see these colonnades, right? these particular pillars. The next part you see is this is the side, how it really looked in the side way. You understand? Okay. Now, breaking it on down. The next part we're going to deal with is the hypostyle hall. See if I can find a picture of the hypostyle hall. This is the hypostyle hall. This is the hypostyle hall. This is the dots that you see here, which represent the columns. This is the hypostyle hall. This is the next part. And this goes with this. So the temple goes like this. Let's fold this and put this together. You want to show it? You get it on tape. Whatever. The temple goes like this. Now, because we had to blow this into sections. So this is the second part. These are the halls of many columns that I first showed you. That's the second part. You got that? This is the statue of one of the kings, the pharaohs. This is the first part. Now that's the second part of the grand hypostyle hall. This is the outside courtyard. Then you're going into the inside because you see the top on it. Right here is another temple. Right here is another temple of another part. Now let's break this down. Let's see if I can see that temple. Yeah, it's right here too. It's a temple that's on this. Here's a form of that side of that temple. So we have the particular temples now. Okay, now going right along, I need the blueprint to another temple of another. The next section that we're going to deal with. Bear with me. Okay, because this is such a big place. These are the next sections. They had to break them down in twos. Then you go from one section to another section, and then this is the middle section. Now this is a front view of some of the last sections that you're going into. And this particular front view, you still see other columns. You understand what I'm saying? You still see other columns. I think this is also the hypostyle hall. Then they show you the pictures of obelisks and other columns that's broken down throughout the whole temple. But this is a front view of that particular part. Here's another front view of columns that's dealing with obelisks also too. And you can see here this, which is real beautiful. You actually see different pictures of I think that's Osiris, or Osir. And these are particular parts. Now we get to the real juicy part. And this is the last part of it. Now we're going to go into one of the last pieces. Now, there's a smaller temple that is built at this particular grand temple. This smaller temple that is built is one of the most sacred temples of the world. It's a temple that is the temple of the Great Mother. Now let me explain. When you go down the aisle of a church, you say you're getting married. You know that aisle. That aisle, or if a church has a center aisle, that is the fallopian tube, the birth canal, right? And then when you get to the pulpit, that's the womb, the sanctum sanctorum, known as the Holy of Holies. Now the white boy switched this up. In marriage, he has the woman coming down the aisle. But a woman doesn't come down the aisle. A woman is the womb. So in actuality, he's supposed to have the man coming down the aisle in marriage, because the man symbolizes the penis and the sperm, and sperm travels up the fallopian tube, right? The birth canal. Not the woman traveling up, because the woman has a womb. How the hell is she going to need to travel up to her own womb? You see what I'm saying? So they switched this thing around. In actuality, the man is supposed to be led up that aisle, not the woman. You see. One other key thing we need to do when we have African weddings, we need to lead this thing up, lead the man up the aisle. You see what I'm saying? Not the woman. Now, we're going to find out a good book is The Temple and Man, because I'm going to Luxor after this, or what we call Waset.
Father, what you do is one favor. You explain what the temple is.
African weddings, we need to lead this thing up, lead the man up the aisle. You see what I'm saying? Not the woman. Now, we're going to find out a good book is The Temple and Man, because I'm going to Luxor after this, or what we call Waset.
Father, what you do is one favor. You explain what the temples were for what happened within the temples?
Okay. The temples were nothing but great universities of learning. They were also places of worship, but then again, we got to realize that they didn't separate education from religion. There was no such thing as a religion in ancient Kemet. It was an Egyptian educational system. And there was no difference between spirituality and education. There was the science of God and the science of nature. And you learned it all for 40 years. So the priests used to, these were their training centers for the priesthood, like UCLA and different things. But it was also temple worship for the people that lived in Kemet also too. So what went on there? Anything from spiritual operations, physical operations, spiritual learning, physical learning, well, you know, rote learning, and spiritual worship. Now also, it was interesting because the Egyptians used to do this. At one time when you lived in Atlantis and Lemuria, what had happened was you used to have this knowledge on the inside of you. Then after the knowledge shut down, yeah, we can take a chair. You know, make sure you're comfortable. Then after the knowledge shut down, because we got all day. Did you get that straight? Get that straight? Did it cost anything? Yeah, well, whatever. We got all day. Now, what happened was, there was at one time in history, you were in touch with the spiritual world because your spiritual centers was open. Your pineal gland, your crown chakra, your crown chakra, all the other chakras. You got 12 major chakras, but your 7 major chakras, the ones that you see, were all open. So at that particular time, you had direct contact with the spiritual world. So now, there was a certain amount of physical operations and things you did when you got sick. But what happened with the operations when you didn't get sick was when they couldn't help you physically. Let's put it that way. When they couldn't help you physically in physical operations, because now physical operation or physical surgery is the lowest manifestation of medicine. That's the last resort. So at times when it was beyond the priest, because at one time you had correct communication with your cousins on the star system Sirius, Betelgeuse, Regal, Andromeda, and different other places. So at one time you had a certain amount of contact with them. So you just call the brothers up, say, I'm in the 3rd dimension. Even though the vibratory rate hadn't gone down that much, you could get spiritual operations. Well, the Egyptian priests, what they used to do is in these temples, they used to come in and summon the gods, and the spirit would come and do the operation or the particular surgery spiritually and prepare and repair things that the physical person, the physical body wasn't able to do anymore. You see. So this is what you have when you have actual rituals going on now, is actually summoning the gods to do work that you do not have the manifestation to do, or you don't have the capability of doing anymore because you're limited with the physical thing. So there's a different spiritual vibe that used to go on now. The woman, Shashi McIntyre, said she had lupus in the early 80s or late 70s or whatever, and Dr. Ben told her, said, I want you to come to Egypt with me, Kemet with me, and let's see what happens. And she went there, and she went into the temples, and when she got out, there was a guy standing there taking pictures. And everybody, when they got back to America, they found out that those pictures had actual pyramids over their heads, a spiritual pyramid over each person's head, like a halo. And what it did with her, it cured her from lupus, because she had terminal lupus that she was going to die, and it cured her. Another thing is, one brother went to the temple of Edfu, which is the temple of Heru. And there, in the Holy of Holies, where there's a block where the actual God used to sit on. Now that the God has been removed based on the European and all. And in that Holy of Holies, they got a light that shines over the block, and you can't see it when you're there, but when you take a picture, it gets frozen. And when you get back, there's a light. There's a brother in D.C. that has some pictures of the light that's also in the Holy of Holies that you might can't see not unless your third eye is open or you are psychic, but you can see it, the camera catches it. And so there's all kinds of spiritual things that are going on. This temple of Karnak had 80,000 people at one time there. That's how big it was, but then again, they had 80,000 students, both women and men, but mainly men for the simple fact a woman is the temple. So she didn't need the same kind of training as a man did. Man is a child, and man needs to become more like woman. Woman needs to become more like man. That's balance. So the object of the mystery system was for the initiate to be as small as the smallest man, like the toi. That's called innocence. And with innocence and humility, God is. That's neutralizing the ego. You understand what I'm saying? That's neutralizing the ego. See, when the ego flares up, the spirit hauls ass. So when you get in a big argument, the spirit leaves. The spirit only flows in calmness and stuff where the humility is. That's a part of God. Look at your woman, the way she takes care of children. That's God. When the child does something wrong, she don't take out a gun and shoot. Whole brotherhood of Sirius, later on known as the brotherhood of Melchizedek. Now, one of the main things that the priest needed to do at that particular time, let's say that you went through this entire temple, and you got to the last part. One of the parts was the Holy of Holies that you went to, and only the priest was able to go here. Only the priest was able to go to the Holy of Holies. Let's see if I can find a picture of the Holy of Holies right quick as we go on. Let's say this is the last little piece, the end piece of the temple. This is the end piece of the temple. This is the Holy of Holies, and only the priest was able to go into this back piece of the temple. Now, after you went through the hypostyle hall and all that, and the Holy of Holies represented the womb, so it's like going back up into your mother. So now also, we're also talking about in the layout, you would come in through the front pylons, go all through this stuff here, and you would have your school in here. And once you complete initiation, you would probably end up in the back of the temple, which is like going back up into the womb. You know how it is, the man takes 9 months to get out of the womb, and the rest of his damn life getting back up in the womb. That's spiritual, you see. There's a black hole in space, which is the constellation of Draco, which is also, there's different black holes. But the supreme black hole is the northern part of the space, and there's a black hole on Earth. That's the woman. You call that the vagina. And yes, we love to go back up in that black hole also, too, to get rejuvenated. Right? Check. Now, I showed you this hippopotamus goddess called Apit, or Tyurt. Let me see if I can find a picture of her right quick. I'm going to show you this hippopotamus goddess, which is the center of heaven in the constellation of Draco. This is very key because there was a temple built to her, and that temple that was built to her, Apit Atayurt, that temple that was actually built to her was actually at the temple of Karnak. And at the temple of Karnak, they built this temple, and it's a very sacred temple, and so we do have a picture of the actual Holy of Holies, not of just the regular goddesses, but the Holy of Holies of the Supreme Mother Apit Atayurt, which is a hippopotamus goddess. I don't have I thought I had some pictures of her. I do have some, but I can't find them at this particular time. But we'll try to add one on the video once we do the editing and all. And so what happens is, the temple of the Holy of Holies, the temple of the Holy of Holies is this particular temple. Now you got to get a real good picture, and I'm going to put this on the back because I don't want nothing sharing the space with this. This is just like the womb. And this is the one side of the, you go through this temple. Now this is a smaller temple of Apit. It's at Karnak. And at Karnak, at this particular smaller temple of the Holy of Holies, there's the temple of Apit, and there's a womb. That particular womb, you have, this is the doorway. That's like going back up into the womb. That's also that stargate that the white man is not talking about in this movie. That outer doorway, the black hole. And in here sits a statue of the temple of Apit. You can't see it, of the hippopotamus goddess. And this is actually a picture of the womb, the Holy of Holies, or the Sanctum Sanctorium. Very key. Very key. Now, does that have a shine on it? Or you got it? Or you say you got it? Okay, cool. Now,
I ask you a couple
Yeah,
of questions?
yeah, ask me a couple of questions.
Now, I've been to the temples. I want you to tell us why the Holy of Holies was so holy and only the priest could go in, and how that relates to the Holy of Holies within the Bible. I mean, is this where the Bible
Yeah.
is from?
The Bible is talking about that, but also the Holy of Holies is the deeper region of your mind called the black dot, which is that. So you have the law of correspondence. You're going to get a book called the Holy Kabbalion by the 3 initiates, which was taken out of the Hermes Trismegistus material, which is the actual material of Tahuti. And in that Holy of Holies, you're going to find out, in that particular book, the Kabbalion, you're going to find out about the laws of correspondence. As above, so below. As within, so without. As on top, so up under. Those are the laws of correspondence, and everything in the universe corresponds. So even though this is an outer temple of the outside of a man-made structure that is explaining the womb, that's also, the vagina is also a sacred part of that womb also. And also another form of correspondence of the Holy of Holies is going back into the deepest regions of your subconscious, the melanin sphere. That is an outer gateway to the other form of the universe. That's the Stargate that the white boys is talking about in the movie Stargate. Now, this particular Holy Holies is representing the womb. Man must be born again. Now, there's several reasons. The average Christian to say, I'm born again, that is a ceremony that really has nothing to do with being born again. The real symbol of being born again is coming from your old self to your higher consciousness. And the way you go through your higher consciousness, you got to go through the Stargate, the black hole. The rebirth of the womb, going back in the womb and being reborn again. So it's also not, so because you can't go back up in that womb only with the penis, even that's a part of sexual tantra, that's a spiritual part of raising yourself up to Christhood. Don't get me wrong. The homosexuals in the Bible turned that around and made that negative. But the other womb is the black dot, which is called the Amenta in the Book of the Dead, the Book of Coming Forth by Day, in the Mysteries of Amenta, which is talking about the deepest regions of the subconscious. Also, there's a mentor in the subterranean worlds under the subterranean worlds under the earth. There's a whole hollow earth, and that's the Amenta. That's the white boy, what he call that hell. Hell is the deepest regions of your mind, and based on whether you got the black dot or not, rather, and makes it as whether you in hell or not. But the hell that we're talking about is this particular third dimension, and we live in hell. So now one part, getting back to this, one part of this temple, when we're talking about that, we're talking about man must be born again. So there was a certain part where the initiate came in, and at certain stages of initiation in the 40-year period he was there, he later on went back up into the Holy of Holies, which was the temple. But the only way you could go in this particular Holy of Holies is you would have had to have gone into the Holy of Holies of your mind, which is the black dot, which is called the beast in Babylon. It's also called the abyss, which is now parts of your book of Revelations was stuff. That's, the book of Revelations is the oldest form of part of the Bible. They took that from the teachings of Tahuti, and Tahuti got it whispered in his ear from Mayat as the form of Sashet. And that particular book of Revelation, some of the terminology in there that you think is negative is actually talking about levels of spiritual development. And your Bible deals with that particular stuff. You see what I'm saying? So now, this particular Holy Holies, the temple was symbolic of your transformation as you went into certain parts of the actual, initiation of the brotherhood on earth. But now I want to say this one other part while it's on my mind. There was a brotherhood on earth, and your initiation was this. This is the primary example. You had a brotherhood on earth that you went into the temples, and each part of the temple symbolized what level of your body that you will actually own. The end result was going through the black dot of the doorway in your mind, and also the doorway in the temple, which is the Holy of Holies. The end result and the most supreme end result of what the actual mystery system is about is to make contact with the brotherhood, not only on earth, but the brotherhood in the heaven of the star system Sirius, called the brotherhood of Melchizedek. So even though we had a brotherhood on earth, which you call a mystery system, which it wasn't a mystery, it was an educational system, and you had a brotherhood in heaven, and you had to make contact with the upper room in your mind and the upper room of the cosmos, which is the brotherhood. And so the supreme brotherhood was ruled there. In Kemet, it was called Medu-Ra-Atan, which was Melchizedek. His original name is Sutek. Hebrew name is Melchizedek. The Arabic word for the Great White Brotherhood, the Sufi, is called the Kutub or the Kutab. Kutab. You see, which is talking about establishing to the higher levels. Now, you know.
So, all right, let me try to recap. The temples then were places, were universities, we can call them universities, but they were places of learning.
Right.
The initiate, where one went to learn how to be in tune
Right.
with this higher self.
Higher self.
Man know thyself.
Man know thyself.
Then he learned all of the principles
Exactly.
of how to raise his consciousness.
Right.
Where he became, hey, wait.
Get that, yeah.
Where he became as, where he raised his lower self
So, right.
to a higher spiritual being.
Being, right.
Where then he could be in communication with things
That's
that were
right.
not on earth.
Not on
He
earth.
became one with nature.
One with nature,
So therefore,
and one with God.
God within himself
Exactly.
was actualized,
Actualized.
and he became, in effect, able to relate in a different way.
That's right.
Nature, as a matter of fact, he
Exactly.
could understand and he could be one with nature.
Right.
So that he thought of water, he could become water.
We could come water and all.
As the Twa now
Can
still are able to do.
exactly. You see, the primitive man is more advanced than so-called the modern man. The modern man, which the white man would have you to believe that the modern technological man is more advanced than the primitive man. See, when you got certain push buttons and certain things that you use to get around using the archetypes of your mind, it shuts down mental thought. Whereas if you use nature, your mind, you see what I'm saying? So there's a whole saying that the mystery system would say, full room, empty mind. Full mind, empty room. That means you don't need the physical things around you as much if you got it in the mind. Now, there's another section in the mystery system we need to talk about is the intellectual aspect, which the 7 liberal arts, where you just didn't learn one art, you learned everything. So you just didn't go to college and learn, I just learned computer programming while I was there. No, you learned everything because you had 40 years to do it. So you learned everything. But even all the intellectual advancement that most of the Afrocentric scholars is talking about is still the low level. Because after you learn the intellectual thing, and the intellect is the lowest level of the actual mystery system, then you went into what is called the spiritual aspect, or you learn them both together. So it was both the physical, you have the intellect, and the spiritual, you have the right brain. So the intellect is left brain. The spiritual is right brain. So now, when the brothers say the sisters are not as smart, no, it's just that you are using the mathematical equations, and the sister is using the spiritual equations. And the spiritual is more higher. So therefore, you have to start breaking down this left brain and going into the right brain. You call it female intuition. No, it's the female spiritual ability that you're supposed to have, but you are now using left brain. It is not logic. Now, the white boy always used this logic, and he uses the 7 liberal arts, but he don't understand that there's another spiritual side. But he can only get that part. Now, the worst thing we ever made was the thinking when the white boy got a jump on us. The white boy was saying that I'm just as smart as you are. And so the reason why we couldn't monitor that is because the white boy proved that intellectually we were almost the same, even though we are smarter than him. It takes him a longer time to get to that stage, whereas us, you see, we can do this thing like that. But it's just that they systematically in the school shut us down. You know that conspiracy to destroy black boys because Joanza and Jupa. You see what I'm saying? But even in intellect, where the white boy is talking about his intellect and all this stuff he can do with intellect, he's building these buildings and all this technology. Intellect is the lowest part. Tell the white boy, if you're superior, then show me how spiritual you are. Not intellectual. Intellect is low. You can teach a monkey how to do shit.
But what about the people who would come and say, you know, with all the spiritual stuff, I mean, you still are oppressed.
Right, but see,
Still not...
Exactly. And the reason why we say that is this. First of all, let's get on this white man. When you talk about, is he spiritual? He can't be. He killed all the animals off the earth. He killed the water. He killed the air. He killed all the people off the earth. He killed the earth. And now he's trying to kill space. That's nothing spiritual at all, because he's not one with nature. He's destructive. So that's no contest on where he's spiritual. Now, he don't have that spirituality. That's why you got to keep looking in the Bible, looking in the book, looking in the book, and quoting scriptures. But can you live like the goddamn twat? Excuse the expression.
In other words, you are saying now, then, that our spiritual development reflects our ability to be one with nature and coexist.
That's right. Now, you asked the question, if we have the actual ability to be spiritual, why are we oppressed? The reason why we are oppressed is not because we don't have the ability to be intellectual. We can be intellectual, and if you notice, black people fill every position in the world except vice president and president. Everything else we got. That ought to let you know, and we could probably run the presidency better than the white man because we're going to be fair about it. Whereas his president is based on exploitation, because you don't get in that chair now unless you take an oath with the Illuminati and be one with the New World Order. But let's deal with this. The reason why we have been oppressed because we're thinking we need to be the best we can be based on the intellect that the white boy gives us, which is only 33 degrees of what he learned from us in the first place. But we don't understand the reason why we're oppressed is the simple fact that we have we have lost the aspects of spirituality. Now, when we still say black people are more spiritual, no, you were talking about based on fundamentalism, how you feel. Yes, the spirit is in you. That's called edukare, to draw out. You got the 360 degrees in you. But that's to draw out. But what we're talking about here is when you go into the fundamentalism, yeah, you reading the Bible, and yes, there's something spiritual in you that makes you even better than the white Christian, but that is not even tapping into the real spirituality, because most Christians, when you start talking about real spiritual things, astral planes, Buddhic planes, etheric planes, the Devashanic planes, the hierarchy of Sirius, disappearing, living underwater, living under the dirt, not breathing, not eating, never eating again in your life, then they say you're crazy. So it's one thing to talk about spirituality and to have what you call religious ceremony. It's another thing of transforming yourself to another level. Now, back to the one little thing before we get off this here. Why are black people oppressed? Because black people have lost the physical and spiritual abilities to be none other than God, because it is not written in your law that ye are God. So what is the black man capable of doing? The black man is not just capable of running a doggone society. We've done that before, and the white man just copying us and doing a bad job of it. But black man is capable of running the universe, and everything you see the animals that can do out here, black people can do. We can fly, we can shake shit. So we're talking about a whole other consciousness. Now, the key to the whole thing is this. This is the key on why we have failed. Number one, the vibratory rate had fallen, and so it was inevitable. We was going to fall anyway, because that's a process of devolution. Just like the earth goes to sleep and things, we go through a transformation stage where we go through a metamorphosis and we go through a hibernation stage. Because we are spiritual people, and we are earth's people, and we are cosmic people, and the cycles of time, you go into hibernation stages as well as rebirth. So there's a darkness period, so it was going to come anyway. You see what I'm saying? The key why we cannot make it and why we are oppressed, because we are thinking that success in this society is to be like the white boy as far as running the society, and that is the lowest level of society. We're only basing that off materialism, and materialism is the lowest part of the planet, of the cosmos. The physical plane is the lowest part. That's the dead part. But we have gone through the materialistic part. That's what we have when we see the physical structures of Egypt. Now it's time to go back to the spiritual part. So we have outgrown what you know of as physical life on this planet, but by us being spiritual beings, because we have a black God in us, it's time for us to go to the other level on which we were when we first came on the planet. You see. So we didn't come on the planet as physical beings in what you see Egypt. We came on the planet as spiritual beings, and we went into what you call Egypt when the vibratory rate slowed down. That was our physical existence, and we lasted for a couple of thousand years in the physical. But now it's time to go back to the spiritual on what we first did when we came into the planet, when we were the gods of the universe. So we have outgrown this. So now we understand the reason why the white boy is trying to hold on to all of this, for the simple fact he is only on the physical level, and he can't get to that level because he don't have the black dot. He doesn't have the chaos black dot of the chaos, but we do. So now what's happening with black people are following white people, and we're thinking we needed economics, we need all of the things that we have outgrown. We have gone through that stage. We don't need that anymore. Now the brotherhood is saying it's time for you to take back your planet and be the rightful rulers. That's the same thing when you look at the gods in Egypt and what they used to do. Or either look at the Greek gods. Real key. Because see, what you don't realize, the Greek gods come from Egypt. And when you look at what Zeus and Apollo and all them used to do with those particular stories, or with Isis and Osiris, that's the stuff that we do. Because the gods is nothing we're talking about a race of people who fell. You see, from the universal prime creator. So now if the Bible says, is it not written in your law that ye are gods? A God is not supposed to live like the white boy. We're supposed to live better than that. You see what I'm saying? So in actuality, so this is what's going on at this particular time. You see, we have outgrown this. There's another stage that we're trying to go with, and nobody's dealing with that. But everybody is still trying to deal with the physical illusions. And the physical illusion is death. What you know of as life on this planet is actually death. And what you know of that you are calling dead is actually life. So the people on the other side are saying, we're the ones that's living, you're the one that's dead because you're not using 1/10 of your damn brain power. So therefore, there's a whole other realm. It's almost as to say that we're asleep and we're still trying to transform this physical by trying to transform the physical by doing physical and social and political and economical and mundane things. Whereas you transform the physical by going into the room, going into your mind and going into another room. And when you go into another room, what you think is the physical is the illusion, and that disappears. That's called Maya in India.
Let me see if I can sum up and get back to these temples.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be a good student.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. That's how we
All I
get.
can do is to go over
Yeah.
this stuff.
Right.
I want the temples. We were talking about the purpose of these temples. We had established that these were temples were actually learning centers.
Exactly. Transformation.
Transforming one from their lower or their physical into the spiritual plane. Now I want you to do two things. I want you to tell me what were some of the things that one would actually be able to do. We've alluded to them. We've alluded to one priest who had spent 40 years, who had matriculated, graduated, was a high spiritual being who could actually cause it to rain. I mean, I want you to talk about some of the things, even though it may seem impossible to us, what one would be able to do as a priest in Egypt. And also explain to us, one who was on that higher level, you've already alluded to it, that it's cyclical, and it was time for us in terms of the cycles of nature to go to sleep, so to speak. But do two things. Kind of allude to what, so we can get a picture of what we were in terms of how we lived within nature, what we were able to do. The process then of that stepping down, of that falling,
falling,
and allowing then a lower entity to come in. Because this is the question that all young people ask. They say, damn it, if we once ruled the world, if we were the black men that we say we are, how do we let this white man we call a devil, this little imp, how do we let him rule us? That's the question. And until they can understand that, they can't make the next step to transform.
First of all, the missing link is because when most Afrocentric scholars start off, they start with Egypt. Egypt is the way station. That's like starting American history and starting off with let's say starting American history, and you say this is the introduction to American history, and you start off with the 1960s. You see what I'm saying? You got over damn near 200 years that you have taken out. Well, starting off with Egypt is actually like starting off and leaving out almost 1 million years or more of development. But it's real key with Egypt because Egypt is the documentation on the earth of that that million years of development. But most of the people who start off, they thinking that it's just 2,000-3,000 years old. This stuff goes back further than that. They are dating the temples, but the temples in actuality, where the actual physical structures may be 2,000 or 3,000 years old, or a little bit older. But the actual inscriptions and the hieroglyphic inscriptions on the temples go all the way back to Atlantis and Lemuria. We just showed that because we now got the carbon-dated stuff from the South Pacific that's got Anpu, and that's an Egyptian god. So now, first of all, we need to know what were we before we got into this stage.
Yes.
At that particular time, we had complete contact with the gods. You had what is called detailed files that you go back and look at these movies. Anytime you see these science fiction movies, a science fact. Everything that you see, Superman, Batman, or you see the Predator, you see the Predator, you see the Terminator doing, that's what we could do. We had what is called detailed files, which is called cosmic memory. So all the child had to do was to remember the cosmic memory. He had a library in his head. Not only did he have a library of knowledge in his head, he had the ability based on the black dot, which is the same stuff that is in the cosmos, to whatever he thought in his mind, he could make a reality, both in the physical and the spiritual. All what you see on the spiritual level is an idea. That you take a thought and you slow the vibrations down low enough, they'll come into physical matter. That's why the Holy Kabbalion, which is a part of the Tehutian literature, say the first law of nature is not self-preservation. That's a primitive man shit. The white man had to self-preserve himself for the simple fact he ain't got long here. He's on a linear perspective. We are secular people. You see what I'm saying? So, the first law of nature is the law of vibration. Everything in the universe vibrates, and what you see in the physical is slowed down vibrations. Now, based on our spiritual centers that is up, we could think a thought, and we could manifest that thought. You see what I'm saying? And we can manifest that thought. So that means, when we're talking about what, you say, what certain things we do, even when I explain the certain things that we can do, in actuality, I'm explaining limited things, because if you got full use of your mind, and the universe exists in the mind of God. And since is it not written in your law that ye are gods, John chapter 10, verse 34 to 36, then that also means in actuality the universe exists in the mind of man. That's the black dot, the universe be. So, if the universe exists in the mind of man, then what we were saying, anything that you see they talk about in comic books or on science fiction and fantasy movies and different things that you call supernatural, superficial, you used to could do with just thought. So now what happened is, this earth fell into a lower density sphere, and the vibratory rate slowly went down to its lowest point. And based on the lowering of the vibratory rate, the deeper we fell into degeneration. So therefore, you couldn't do the same thing that you used to could do a couple of thousand years ago, or a couple of million years ago. So therefore, the Egyptian temples used to come in, and that's why the temples was made then to bring the priest back up to the level on where he could use all of his brain and tap into the particular science of what he used to could do when he was the gods of Atlantis. So at one time, you used to have detailed learning, detailed files in here, the Akashic records and cosmic memory, and also cosmic ability to do what you want to do, whereas you didn't need so much of the physical because it was all inside of you. If you want to go to other planets, you could do that. If you could live up under the water, you could live up under the earth, you could do anything, you didn't have to eat, you could have sex on the astral planes, anything you wanted to think of in your mind, you used to could do that. And that's what we're going back to now.
Now, what governed that in terms of I know the Egyptians had the 42 negative
confession, right?
But what moral or spiritual or prime law kept one from actually using that in an extremely destructive manner?
Okay, let me explain that. You had a question?
I was going to point out, why did that happen based on, we felt so lazy that we could be supreme.
Right, yeah, okay, yeah. I'm going to get into that. That's exactly.
Have you changed the tape downstairs? I don't want to miss this.
Keep going. Okay, now look. You saying what spiritual laws you had. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad makes a point that you were righteous by nature. And what does that mean? You don't have, the animal out here that you call inferior don't have to have no moral code on the way he goes about life. It just is. You understand what I'm saying? The dog don't have to read no Bible. He don't have to have that type stuff. It just is. The Twa people, case in point, Twa people, the Dogon, some parts of the Dravidians, your people in the South Pacific, your people in the rainforest down in South America, indigenous people. They don't need no moral code of certain things to make them have a good moral behavior throughout life. They are one with nature, and it just is. You see what I'm saying? If something is innate, see, when we talk about righteousness, there's got to be a paradigm of righteousness in the get-go. Well, where did this paradigm of righteousness come from? Did it come from God? Yes. But is it not written in your law that ye are gods? Yes. Well, most of the stuff that you see that's the paradigm of righteousness was actually a carbon copy on how we behave. So what you call in righteousness when you talk about mythology or your moral scriptures is nothing but a carbon copy of what you used to do. And what humans have done, humans can do. See what I'm saying? So it's a form of the nature. That's why when I read this heretical prior to the British Museum that's talking about the white man, they say he has a restless nature. And as a result of us falling so low, we now have a program and a trained behavior. And that's not our rightful nature. There's certain things right now in our lowest state that black people do. They're still righteous that the white man copies as the model of humanity, or the model of moral authority in this country. Black people, even in their dead state, is the moral of humanity in this country. If the white man want to legitimize something in this country, the first thing he does is he want to legitimize something that's wrong. He go and get a white black person to be in it, so therefore he can legitimize it. Because he knows he is the apex and the epitome of what is not. You see. So some of the things was just our nature. Now let me get into one other part. We're going to get into two parts on why we had to fall and how else what happened when we fell. When we fell, the chakra centers, the pineal area, the black dot, and all of the crown chakra and the spiritual wheels of light in us closed down. Because the earth steadily fell deeper and deeper into the third dimension, which is the lowest form of the physical. And the physical trapped all of the spiritual stuff, and that stuff stopped operating. So what we used to use as cosmic memory, we had to go to a mathematical equation to think up cosmic memory. That's where geometry, astronomy, astrology, trigonometry, reading, writing, and the 7 liberal arts came into being to mathematically equate what we had gotten rid of that was natural nature, the cosmic stuff. You understand what I'm saying? Now, why did all this, this is where your mystery system came in, to learn the basic 7 liberal arts, and then to go into spiritual attainment to get the priests back to that level. And then they understood that they couldn't, all the people in the world couldn't go to that Christ level, so the priests ran the society and made sure that the moral structure that they put in the scriptures is what the masses of the people would behave like. And that's where you have moral code come in. It came in as a remembrance of what you used to do when you were gods. Because the moral code is to follow up to be one like God. I want to be like Jesus. I want to be like the Lord. Well, who is the Lord? The Lord is what you used to be like before this thing fell. That's where moral structures came in. So we're talking about a level of degeneration when you say, where's the moral code? You understand? Now, what happened? Based on a war in heaven, they had to, in order to redeem and to save a certain part of the universe, they had to, what they had to do is they had to take a planet and bring it down so low until it would go through actual literal hell. Now, why? Why is this? Why? Why do we have to go through hell? You understand that there's a part of the universe that is so high and so righteous until it did not know the lowest depths of evil that there was. So in order for it to go any higher than what it is, the cosmos, the heavens, it has to go to the lowest part. So they chose a people, well, part of our people chose a group of the race to do that. And part of that is this particular solar system. And the lowest part of this solar system is the Earth. That's why the Earth is more physical than the other planets. That's why it's got the water on top and all of the land, and most of the people live on the outside. A lot of people live on the outside, even though there are people that live on the inside. You see what I'm saying? But the Earth is the lowest part, case in point. Get you a picture of the Holy Kabbalah to show you exactly what I'm talking about. Show you a picture of the Holy Kabbalah, which will explain. These are the different levels of the planets, but the Earth is down here called Malkuth. Then you have Jupiter, Mars, Saturn, and all the other ones. You see, like that. Okay. The Earth is down here, which is the lowest part. Which means the Earth had to go through the lowest degeneration period in anything. So the vibratory rate was supposed to speed down. So therefore, when we was in Atlantis and Lemuria, we stayed there for a couple of thousand years, maybe a million. And then it had to degenerate even more. Then Egypt came on, which is still higher than today. Then we stayed a couple of thousand years, and then the vibratory rate went down even lower into what you got now. And that was conducive for the white man to live on the planet. Now the key to this is this. Why so low? Why? Because they say that the people on earth are going to take the supreme head of the heaven. Why? Because we have totally forgotten who we are. We got cultural amnesia. We don't know who we are as a people. Even a roach knows what a roach is. Even a gnat knows what a gnat is. Even an ant knows what an ant is. Even a grain of dirt knows what the dirt is. The only thing in the entire universe, the omniverse, that don't know what it is the black man and the black woman, mainly on earth. And to even go further than that, in the hills of North America. So because you have gone solo, there's nothing in the universe that you haven't traveled, because you went to the bottom. So you're the only one that is actually qualified to take the supreme head. You see what I'm saying? To take the supreme head. So we had to go that low. So it's just like a bouncing ball. If you take a ball and you bounce it with a little bit of force, when it comes up, it might go this high. But if you bounce it with the most supreme force of gravity, with the low vibratory rate, it'll go the highest when it bounces back up, based on the force. So it's about like that when it comes to involution and evolution.
When we talk about the black dot, and I am going to let you go back, and this is a segue back into the temple battle. When we talk about the black dot, if you would explain, because maybe some of our listeners do not understand in depth what we're talking about with the black dot, how it is related to the pineal gland, and how that is related to black people and white people, and why you say that white people do not have the black dot or the gate, the star gate, why they cannot ascend to a higher level. And then, if you will, I want you to segue that into the temple in which it is laid out like a man, so we can actually see where the Egyptians understood these deep mysteries, and they even build these temples to relate to and to teach specifically from the design of the temple itself.
Okay. All right. First of all, we understand that if you are in the image of God and it is not written in your law that ye are gods, then what the supreme level of the cosmos that you call, that is the black substance that make up the stars and make up all the other stuff, which is the supreme essence of what God is, because in the core of every star is the black substance. But that make those stars up is the black substance. So what you see out there, the white boy call it dark matter in science. What you see out there with blackness is actually something. And it is the essence of God. It's called the primal materia, called the great works. But if you are in the image of God, you also have the black substance in you. And because you are black, that is an indication that you do have the black substance. Because Beth means house. Ham comes from Cam, that means black. Bethlehem means the black house. And the sun in Bethlehem, which you call the Christ, is also the black house that you got. You got a sun inside of you, which is also called a star in Bethlehem. The physical star in Bethlehem was the star Sirius that you saw. The other star in the Bethlehem that you see right here, because this is the house, was the star Sirius that's in you, which is also the sun in black that you call the in Bethlehem that you call the black dot. So it is the gateway, and it is the Son of God that is in you. It is the Son of God that is in the Son of God, because we are the heirs of God. But there's something on the inside of you that not only are you on the physical level, but there's a link that there's the difference in you from being only on the physical level is there's a doorway in you that not only makes you on the physical, but it links you to the cosmos as well. White people don't have this black dot, so therefore they're only on the physical level.
Why don't they have it?
They have why don't they have it is because in our form of degeneration, it was inevitable that we could not take ourselves down that low, because God can only be at the nature of God. So therefore, based on the vibratory rate, some of us invented this Yakub, that I got the historical researches of Yakub. Some of us invented a European based on gene splicing. But anytime you got the original prototype that comes through nature and spiritual attainment of the cosmos, and then you go in and make another prototype from that, I don't give a damn how well you make it, it's not going to be as good as the original. It's just like that oil. You could take perfumes and make perfumes all day, but it's never going to be as original as the oil that the perfumes are made from. That's the concentrated, potent stuff. Well, in the case of Europeans, we now have actual evidence that I'm going to get into with a particular temple of Abydos that has the documents of the European being created. And we'll give the historical documents on that for the people that don't believe. Based on that, what you have is this particular European is a created person that we created. And as a result, he does not have the full manifestation of the essence of what we are. So even in our creation, even though we can create a person that can function on the physical level, because we created him on the physical level, it doesn't necessarily mean he can function on the spiritual level. So as a result, what you have is you have a person that is conducive to the physical level, and based on a certain amount of lower energies, because the physical level is on such a low vibratory rate, he can be conducive to the physical level and all aspects of the physical, and all, which is the lowest level. But he cannot be conducive at the highest level because he was never created from the highest regions. But we all were. And our sperm and our stuff is created from the highest regions. Whereas him, because he's created on a lower level, his sperm and the actual spiritual energy, or the energy that's coming to make him into his essence, which is energy on the inside, comes from lower astral planes. Where our origin comes from the highest astral plane, they call the Jivashanic plane, or they call the melanin realm. So the reason why they don't have melanin is because we were created out of melanin, and they were created out of gene splicing in the physical world. And part of that, they gene spliced, they grafted not only genes from us, but they grafted genes from an ape. But even the ape is more spiritual because the ape is in its rightful habitat. And it does things nature-wise. But the European is grafted, and this is why it looks like an ape with the same hair and all this type of stuff, but it's something of only lower material matter, which I'll go into that particular part. So therefore, the supreme part that makes us God, which was created in heaven, is the black dot, which is that link, that doorway. Because it was only created on the physical realm, it does not have the black dot and cannot have the black dot. And now the difference between some white people is some white people are miscegenated black people that still have the black dot. And you got 80%. You have 15% of some white people that have the black dot. Those are not white people. Those are black people that look white.
Now, when we talk about the black dot, we're actually talking about a pineal gland that's not calcified.
We're talking about well, that's the physical element, is a pineal gland that's not calcified. But the black dot is called the dark night of the soul, which means in actuality it is the soul.
Okay.
So when you talk about this particular, now that it is the soul. Now when you talk about this particular not having the black dot means in actuality you have lower astral energy that can be mistaken for a soul, but it's not the soul. The only reason why you don't understand that it's not a soul is because you are dealing with intellect, and you all, because you can teach a monkey how to do some things. You're dealing with that. Hell, a damn parrot can talk. You're dealing with intellect because it has a brain cavity, it can function, but you don't know what the soul is of. But then again, we know that he couldn't have a soul for the simple fact that any person that has a guilt deficiency. Bobby E. Wright told you that in Psychopathic Racist White People. And any person that is against nature itself, and anything he is killed and he's defied all the laws, creator laws, that means that he couldn't have a soul. He has a guilt deficiency, and you got to realize this about the particular European also too. The European, France and England had a war for 100 years. Now that means in actuality to have a war for 100 years, that means that war is the norm and peacetime is abnormal. So when we talk about peacetime, it's not talking about his nature. And even in his peacetime, he's never at peacetime. He just has a clever way of doing things where he don't have to have physical violence, but he has mental violence and social and political violence. You see? So it's when he does have peacetime, you're thinking that he's being all right. No, he's just got a more advanced way to carry out his particular violent behavior, his destructive behavior. You see? So now, when we talk about that, and we'll get into this white man in a few minutes, historical evidence proved that obviously this man doesn't have a soul. That's just based on history alone. But now we have the archaeological evidence, and because we're talking about the temples, based on the temples of Egypt, we have the archaeological evidence that he's a biological mutation from the original person.
Can we look at that temple?
Yeah, we're going. Well, okay. What we're going to do is that's one of the grand finales. So, because we got to do it in a sequential order.
All right.
So we're going to get to that particular part. Now, what I want to do is I want to take a little break and get some water or whatever. When we come back,